Happy Wednesday, juniors. I hope everybody's day is going well. I just got in from outside where we played some fetch and I just soaked up some vitamin D and went for a long walk on Washburn's campus this morning. So I hope that you guys are getting some much needed exercise and I'm messing with my charger isn't working. Come on, baby. I need you to work. Yay. All right. I hope you guys are getting some much needed sunshine and boy, don't get blown away today if you're going outside. So anyway, I hope that you've had a chance to watch and listen to chapter 1. So today we are going to go right into chapter 2. We have met Miss Emily. We are at her funeral. We have learned that she is from a very affluential family. And that she was a noble obligation for the town to make sure that they took care of her after her father had died. We know that Colonel Sartoris, who was the mayor at the time, way back when, remitted her taxes, meaning that she didn't have to pay taxes anymore. And they made up a story that her dad had donated a bunch of money to the town. Therefore, this is their way of paying her back. So the new generation has come along and they want their money. And so they have tried to get it from Miss Emily. They went and paid her a visit. And it had been 10 years since anybody had ever stepped foot in her house, or a long, long time before she was getting China painting lessons. Remember that? And she said, "You're going to have to talk to to Colonel Sartoris about my taxes. I have no taxes in Jefferson." And she didn't even realize that he'd been dead for 10 years. So that's kind of where we are at right now. And we are ready now for chapter 2, and it's very short, so it won't take us any time at all. So here we go. Let's go back up to her voice was cold and dry. This is, let's go up to she did not. She did not ask them to sit, the alderman. She just stood in the door and listened quietly until the spokesman came to a stumbling halt, and then they could hear the invisible watch ticking at the end of her gold chain. Her voice was dry and cold. "I have no taxes in Jefferson. Colonel Sartoris explained it to me. So perhaps one of you can gain access to the city records and satisfy yourselves." "But we have, ma'am. We are the city authorities, Miss Emily. Didn't you notice from the sheriff? Signed by him? Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't you get a notice from the sheriff signed by him?" "I received a paper, yes," Miss Emily said. "Perhaps he considers himself the sheriff. I have no taxes in Jefferson." "But there's nothing on the books to show that. You see, we must go by that. You need to see Colonel Sartoris. I have no taxes in Jefferson." "But Miss Emily, Colonel Sartoris, you just see him. Colonel Sartoris had been dead almost 10 years. I have no taxes in Jefferson. Toby?" The Negro appeared. "Show these gentlemen out." So she vanquished them. Vanquished, that's a vocab word. It means she threw them out, horse and foot, just as she had vanquished their fathers 30 years before about the smell. Get your notebook out and write that down. In chapter 2, I'm going to pause and then I'll come right back. Or you can pause. I'll pause. Alrighty, so she has thrown the aldermen out, just like it said she had thrown out their fathers, the generation ahead, 30 years before, about the smell. Very huge piece of foreshadowing that Faulkner gives us. That was 2 years after her father's death, and a short time after her sweetheart, the one that we believed would marry her, had deserted her. So 30 years before she threw out these youngsters, she had thrown out their fathers that were also aldermen on the board. And they came visiting her about some kind of smell. And that 30 years was 2 years after her father had died. And during that time, that 2 years after her father died, she found a sweetheart. And the townspeople thought that he would marry her, and he actually deserted her. So after her father's death, she went out very little. And after her sweetheart went away, people hardly ever saw her at all. A few ladies had the temerity is a vocab word, the gall, the guts, the cojones to call, but they were not received. Now, when they're talking about calling, it's not on the phone, guys and gals. We're talking about knock, 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 knock. I'm coming to call on you, Miss Emily, to see how you are. That's what that calling means. A few of the ladies had the temerity to call, but they were not received. And the only sign of life about the place was the Negro man, a young man then, going in and out with a market basket. Just as if a man, any man, could keep a kitchen properly, the ladies would say. So they were not surprised when the smell developed. So the townspeople think that the smell must have developed because of the trash and maybe a nasty refrigerator box or something that Toby wasn't cleaning. Okay, so they weren't surprised about this smell. It was another link between the gross, teeming world and the high and mighty Griersons. A neighbor, a woman, complained to the mayor, Judge Stevens, who was 80 years old at the time. Well, what will you have me do about it, madam? He said. Why, send her word to stop it, the woman said. Isn't there a law? I'm sure that won't be necessary, Judge Stevens said. It's probably just a snake or a rat that man of hers killed in the yard. No, I'll speak to him about it. So somebody from the town, a gossipy woman, went to the judge, Mr. Stevens, Judge Stevens, to make him do something about this awful smell that was coming from Miss Emily's house. And he said, that's not going to be necessary. Don't you know who she is? She's a Grierson. We're not going to go knocking on the door and saying, yo, Miss Emily, your house stinks to high heaven and we can smell it outside. Because that would be extremely insulting. Just checking on Dakota. We're not going to do that. And the woman said, well, can't you do something about it? And he said, it's probably just a snake or a rat. I'll speak to him. All right. So the next day, he received 2 more complaints, Judge did. One from a man who came in diffident deprecation. He was ticked. We really must do something about it, Judge. I'd be the last one in the world to bother Miss Emily, but we've got to do something. And that night, the board of aldermen met 3 graybeards and 1 younger man. A graybeard is an old man. And 1 younger man, a member of the rising generation. It's simple enough, Judge Stevens said. Send her word to have her place cleaned up. No, that wasn't. One of the board of aldermen said that, not Judge Stevens. It's simple enough, he said. Send her word and have her place cleaned up. Give her a certain time to do it in, and if she don't, damn it, sir, Judge Stevens said. Will you accuse a lady like Miss Emily to her face of smelling bad? So the next night, after midnight, 4 men crossed Miss Emily's lawn and slunk about the house like burglars, sniffing along the base of the brickwork and at the cellar openings, while one of them performed a regular sewing motion with his hand out of a sack slung from his shoulder. So instead of having somebody knock on Miss Emily's door and accuse her of smelling, he sent, Judge Stevens, 4 men in the middle of the night when it was dark, and they went sniffing around her house to find out where they could find the smell. And they would go along the baseboard, they'd dip their hand in a bag, and then they'd do this sifting motion. You know how when you're spreading grass seed, or when your parents are spreading grass seed, That's sewing. Okay. So they're doing something like that. They broke open the cellar door and they sprinkled lime in there and in all of the outbuildings. Okay, I'm going to roll way back to your freshman year. Do you remember when we read Cask of Amontillado and there was niter in the catacombs because that niter would kill the smell? It's much like lime. Niter and lime are very much the same. It kills smells and things. So, okay, now we'll roll back into present time. As they recrossed the lawn, a window that had been dark was lighted, and Miss Emily sat in it. The light behind her and her upright torso motionless as that of an idol, somebody that just like a statue. And they crept quietly across the lawn and into the shadow of the locusts that lined the street. And after a week or two, the smell went away. There's so much foreshadowing. There's so much foreshadowing. I love this story. I am wondering if you all know any idea about what might be going on. I love this story so much. Okay, so that all of a sudden they recross the lawn and they look up, and Miss Emily is sitting in this room, and all you can see is her silhouette and sitting upright in this room that was once just a moment ago dark. And then after they spread the lime, a week or two, the smell went away. Okay. It wasn't downstairs. I'm sorry, it was upstairs. That was when the people had begun to really feel sorry for her. People in our town, remembering how old Lady Wyatt, her great aunt, had gone completely crazy at last, believed that the Griersons held themselves a little too high and mighty for what they really were. So Faulkner has just told us that the Griersons have some mental illness in their family, because it's right here. Oh, come on. People in our town, remembering how old Lady Wyatt, Miss Emily's great aunt, had gone completely crazy at last. They believed that the Griersons held themselves to a little too high and mighty of an attitude for what they really were. So a lot of people in town thought that they held themselves to a high and mighty podium when really they did not belong on it. We had long thought of them as a tableau, Miss Emily. Now, a tableau is a painting. So Faulkner's and the narrator's trying to paint a picture for us, okay? So picture this as if it's a painting. Miss Emily, a slender figure in white in the background of this tableau, and her father, a sprawled silhouette in the foreground, his back to her, clutching a horsewhip, and the two of them framed by the back flung front door. To when she got to be 30 and was still single, we were not pleased exactly, but we were vindicated. Even with insanity in the family, she wouldn't have turned down all of her chances if they had really materialized. Okay, so basically what Faulkner is telling us in this instance is picture Emily in this painting. Like, this is what her life was probably like. Her dad's in front with a horsewhip, okay? She's in back, meaning that all of the gentlemen callers that called on Emily had to get past her dad first. And her dad thought that there was no guy good enough to date his daughter. So she's sitting here 30 years old and she hadn't married anybody yet. Okay. So they're saying surely she wouldn't have turned down every single one of those guys if they had really materialized. So did they? Didn't they? Were all of these gentlemen callers something that the Griersons made up? We don't know. But when her father died, it went around the town that the house was all that was left to her from her father. And in a way, people were glad. At last, they could pity Miss Emily. Being left alone and a pauper, poor, she had become humanized. Instead of being clear up here, she was down here on the same level as everybody else, maybe a little bit lower. Now she too would know the old thrill and the old despair of a penny, more or less. The day after his death, her dad's, the day after her father's death, all of the ladies prepared to call at the house and offered condolence and aid, as is our custom. Miss Emily met them at the door, dressed as usual and with no trace of grief on her face. She told them that her father was not dead. She did that for 3 days, with the ministers calling on her and the doctors trying to persuade her to let them dispose of the body. Just as they were about to resort to law and force, she finally broke down, and they buried her father quickly. Okay. So Miss Emily was getting people coming to her house calling on her in grief. And she's like, I don't know why you're here. My father's not dead. So she was a little bit, if you know what I mean. Her father is there in the house. Let's go clear back up here. Talking about this smell. Yeah, talking about the smell when they came to sow the lime to cut the smell. I don't know. Even here it says, motionless of an idol. What? I don't know. What was Miss Emily doing? I don't know. Anyway. We did not say that she was crazy then. We believed that she had to do that. We believed that she had to keep her father there, even though he was dead. And we remembered all of the young men that her father had driven away. And we knew that with nothing left, she would have to cling to that which had robbed her, as people will. So they're saying she had to cling to the only man that was in her life, because her father drove all of the other men away, and this was all that was left, and she didn't want to let him go. So we uncovered a whole lot in just this little tiny area here. So I'm going to go and check any of the questions that you guys had or that you left. And I am going to keep that, what do I want to call it? Oh no, I'll make another one. I'll make another discussion question. Okay. In case you guys have any, I'll make another discussion question for chapter 2 and then come back and I'll be reading chapter 3. I hope you guys are doing well. Love you guys. Be well, be safe, be blessed, and know that I'm thinking of you guys and I miss you a lot. I will talk to you later. How do I end this? Pause. See ya.